think. Yep, item 5. And I'd like Helen White to come and present to us, please. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm joined at the table by John Fussell, who is... Thank you, Mayor. I'm joined at the table by John Fussell, who will talk to the report in relation to the community boards briefings and workshops, and I will speak to the governing body side briefings and workshops. So this report that's before you today was generated as a result of a council resolution from last November, which is within the context of an ombudsman's report that came out in October, which talks about workshops to be held in public where it is reasonable to do so, and unless there is a good reason not to. And the advice today in the staff report is that we follow the Ombudsman's guidance and decide to do that by default. I do just want to make it clear to everybody that this report from the Ombudsman does represent a step change in his advice and what is good practice. And it is different from the advice that he gave us and recorded in his report about this council in 2019. This report that came out in October was following an investigation that the Ombudsman initiated into 8 councils. Christchurch City Council was not one of those councils. But as a result, the recommendations in that report, the Ombudsman has made clear he expects them to be followed by all councils. One of the things that the Ombudsman makes clear in his report is he does recognise the value of workshops. And he notes in particular when they are a two-way engagement at the formative phases of decisions that it enables staff to understand preferences that allow staff not to waste time and to focus on the options that are viable. He also recognises the value in workshops when there is an educational value or a matter is particularly complex or technical, and there is a need to take some time to ensure that all members understand the matter that is before them. And the last area he talks about the benefit for having workshops or briefings is when a decision is multifaceted. So when a matter that is coming to you in not just one report, but in many reports. So that would include, for example, long-term plan decisions. So what this report gave to us was the opportunity to look at our current practices and identify if there was anything we were doing that doesn't fit within what the Ombudsman is now saying is best practice. And we have found that some of the things that we have been doing in the past doesn't quite fit with how the Ombudsman sees workshops should be conducted. So that does mean that the number of briefings that you have currently experienced will reduce. It also means that the information that is before you when you make a decision around this table is that we are looking at how we present that to you, and that will include some changes to the report template so that all the information that you need to make a decision is before you when you are having a formal meeting like this one. So operationally, what does this mean in terms of changes? It means when we do have a workshop or a briefing, and we are proposing to change the name to information sharing sessions, that there will be published agenda that everyone can see. They will know what is being talked about. Papers will be provided in advance, and the public will be available to view those sessions where it's reasonable. There will still be good grounds sometimes to not have the door open, and that may be that the matter you need to work through in a workshop setting is commercially sensitive, or it may be there is personal information or other matters which are set out in legislation which the Ombudsman considers are reasonable for you to consider appropriate to close the doors. The other matter I did just want to address in relation to asking questions is that in the report, the Ombudsman records that some councils felt that having the door closed allowed councillors to have a safe space to ask the silly questions, and he uses that word silly questions. And his view about that is that elected members should not be afraid to ask those questions in public, that is what you are elected to do. So information sharing sessions, when information is being shared with you, would generally still be held in this room. That is what we are recommending. When there is a two-way engagement required, so when we're talking about a workshop, we are recommending they are not held in this room. The setup in this room for an easy two-way dialogue is not ideal. And the recommendation is that workshops are held either in the committee rooms or in the Mayor's Lounge, where our observation is we see better engagement between staff and members. That does mean that we can't physically accommodate members of the public attending when it's not in this room because of the number of people who would be required to be in the room. Members of the public, though, are not participants in a workshop. The participants are the officers who are advising and yourselves. However, if there are members of the public who are not able to view a workshop virtually, but can only come into this building to view a workshop, my apologies, we will make arrangements for them to view as it's happening somewhere else nearby, if there is a need for that. In terms of how a briefing or a workshop comes about, there are 4 ways that the standing orders allow this to happen. It is either by a resolution, or it is a decision of the Mayor, or it is a decision of a chair of a committee or a community board, or it is a chief executive decision. So those are the 4 routes by which the decision to hold a workshop are made. I was asked a question, which I would like to address today, around the cost of whether to hold a workshop in this room or in a committee room. There is no difference in terms of cost-wise. There would be a cost impact if we were to make physical changes to rooms to facilitate members of the public attending for viewing purposes in a room that is not this one. The choice then is therefore whether the public physically present in this room for a workshop is more valuable than the short-term solution of having workshops in the Mayor's Lounge or the committee's room where the public can view it virtually. Just another matter a question that has been asked is about the length of meetings and whether the formal meetings will take longer because there will be fewer information sharing sessions. And the recommendation is if members have questions to ask, that they ask those in advance. That is already a requirement under the standing orders. The agendas are published on the Thursday before a Wednesday meeting. The standing orders ask that you provide your questions in advance where practicable. And what we will be aiming to do if questions are submitted through the Office of the Chief Executive, that we will then prepare the answers and circulate those and make those available to everyone. If there are follow-ups because the question is not answered sufficiently, they can be addressed in the meeting themselves. I will now turn over to John Fazell, who will speak in relation to community boards.
Thank you, Helen. Largely what Helen said applies to community boards. We've discussed firstly the Ombudsman's report and our emerging response to it with community board chairs and deputy chairs. Last occasion was on the 15th of February. They are supportive of the recommendations. They requested some support and training. As more workshops will be in public and there will be public attending. So there's some personal training for chairs and deputies, which we've agreed to do. They see community board workshops community board rooms as the location to primary location to deliver workshops. Live streaming can be attained from all of those locations. The exception is when there's a big or highly localised issue, for example, civil defence in the eastern hills of Akaroa. That might be better held in the Gaiety Hall. They were also supportive of the logistical and information-related informal meetings remaining private. So there was probably a welcome. They feel more comfortable operating in that environment, and it was largely quite positive. That's probably it for boards.
Happy to answer any
All
questions.
good. Thank you, Helen and John. I'm more than happy to move this, and Councillor Scandrick's more than happy to second it. So we will do questions. We've got Councillor Henstock first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple of questions. In relation to asking questions, we're going to put it through the Office of the OCE. I'm just conscious that sometimes we get late papers, supplementary papers, and there isn't going to be sufficient time. Is there going to be some allowance for us to be asking questions on the day instead of rushing around in a hurried manner?
Oh, absolutely. In relation to the suggested time frame, that's for items that are on the main agenda. If there are supplementaries, it's about what is practicable, and if it's a late report, it may not be practicable for either yourself or for staff to respond in advance.
Thanks for clarifying that. My second question is really in relation to the opportunity for community groups to present some of their ideas and proposals, and you referenced this in the table that we've got, and I'm thinking that we need to be very careful about what we wish for, because on some topics we have a very engaged public, and if given an opportunity they will present at all and every opportunity that they've got. So if efficiency is one of our drivers here for this change, how does this actually work, and what is the process then for those members of the public that do want to actively engage in the process, and what rules and processes have we got to avoid that duplication in terms of same person delivering same message and different people delivering the same message?
If I may, just in relation to addressing the governing body of the council formally, that is still within standing orders for formal meetings and within submission processes. There aren't any other formal arrangements for groups to address the whole council. It may be something in terms of community groups that may be more appropriate for John to address.
Yep, board chairs asked a similar question, and the response was, firstly, Helen's standing orders and the opportunity to make a delegation or or other engagement is still provided for in the workshop itself. To a large extent, it will depend on the nature of the workshop and the nature of the issue, and a discussion with the chair and the deputy chair on how the chair and the governance would like that particular workshop to go. So we'll customise an approach.
Okay,
Thank
you.
you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I do have another couple of things. I think this is an important step change that you spoke about, so I just want to clarify another matter, and it was about the impact of the change, and expected that most matters will go straight to committee or council. You commented on who decides if we're going to have a workshop. I can't recall if you said that there was provision for the councillors to request it. Was that in the list?
No, under the Appendix 7 in the standing orders for a workshop or a briefing or any informal meeting, the four routes for that to be held are the chief executive, the mayor, the chair, or by resolution. So what that would mean in terms of if a councillor had a request, they could make a request of either the mayor, the chair, or the chief executive, or put forward an amendment if it was appropriate, or a notice of motion.
Or the board chair.
Or the board chair, sorry, thank you, John.
Thank you, Alan.
Or the board chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Coker.
Should have submitted this 9 o'clock yesterday. This is about. I've got a few little questions. If people are submitting questions before, which I think is actually really good, but sometimes, and you said you could have follow-up questions if the information wasn't sufficient. But I have to say, I often think of things on the spot. I just want to be assured that we're not going to be limiting questions when we're not having previous briefing times together, sort of to think about things.
That's not the intention of the report. It would be a matter for the meeting and for the chair in terms of normal meeting process and procedure.
Yeah.
But there's still provision in the standing orders for questions to be asked.
Yeah. I was wondering for workshops, because you talked about committee rooms and I forgot the other place you talked about, but we do have a function room where there's more space where you could actually have sort of workshops and fit public in. Has that sort of option been considered?
Yes, and we have considered it. It's not technically set up for to be able to have virtual presence, but it has been looked at as an option in terms of a low-cost, fast option to support the Ombudsman's recommendations. It's not something we can deliver right now.
Okay, and then there's live streaming versus recording, because there's sort of different things noted. Live streaming is preferred. Sometimes it could be recording, and other ones say just recording, say for a seminar. Could you talk through like what is going to be preferred, I guess?
So for an information sharing session or a workshop, they will be recorded at the time and they can be watched live at the time, and we'll provide links for any interested members of the public to do that. They will be on the same sort of quality as the Zoom briefings for such as the community boards have, so it'll be static, and then they will be posted, available for anyone to watch at any time.
I'm guessing, I'm just wanting to know, is live streaming going to be the preference rather than recording and then posting later?
It's just a slight difference, I guess, in terminology. When we have formal meetings like we're having today, where we have audio-visual technicians physically on site, doing a live stream with camera shots, and then that is available for the world to watch on YouTube. Now they can pause it, they can go back to it. What we'd be looking at for the workshops and the briefings is viewing the Zoom call effectively, so it's a lower tech and cheaper option that we as staff can administer without needing to bring in audio-visual technicians, which has the very real cost attached to it.
And then that was my last question, was is there any additional support for community boards for doing more of this? I know they sometimes struggle with the technology as well as running things at the same time.
Yeah, that was a question raised by the board chairs, and the answer given was we will proceed into this, and I think the report says that we'll review this. Is it 6 months?
We'll review it on an ongoing basis, and if there's a need for us to invest additional resource, both at community boards or for council, we'll look at that.
We've identified a staff member who's able to work through board to board to be able to support in the interim. So we're supporting training, and we'll review. It was raised by 2 board chairs.
Okay, sorry, Councillor Keown, please.
Yeah, just around the comments on workshops being held in the committee rooms, because I've been to those before, and also upstairs. Where did the feedback come from that it doesn't work that well in here?
That's what I've been told
canvassed?
by others.
I,
if you're...
I mean, I for one quite like this room and find it works pretty well. But certainly a lot better than a committee room with everyone jammed in. You can't whisper in there because it echoes off the wall behind you as well.
I mean, that's...
Yeah, we could make a judgment call around the events at the time. We're not necessarily locked into having them in any venue. So advertising.
Cool.
Because this corner here has lots of little in-jokes and stuff. And so
Moving right along, Councillor Barber.
I'm intrigued by this. In terms of once we follow these recommendations, who is the arbiter of whether we're actually achieving what the ombudsman is recommending? I mean, who decides that?
If we're achieving that, ultimately, I guess it would be the ombudsman. But our target is to ensure that we fit with his guidance, which he expects all councils to follow, which is in keeping with the legislative principles of being open and transparent in decision making, which is a principle within the Local Government Act. So in terms of who is going to judge, potentially the Ombudsman on inquiry, and ultimately the members of the public who are viewing what the decision making that is happening.
So I can see we've had 8 ombudsmen in the history of the office. What's to say a new ombudsman comes along in a few years? Will that change? I mean, how does that work? Sorry,
I can't answer that.
Yeah.
Historically, ombudsmen have tended to follow what previous ombudsmen have done, but there's no rule or around that. This ombudsman, who has a few years to go on his term, has made these recommendations, and he says it's best practice.
It's the whole office, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Just a quick question from me, Helen. This aligns us with a lot of the rest of the country. We were out of step, so to speak, to a certain point.
Yes, and a large number of other councils already follow similar principles, and there are not that many that I could locate that have briefings in the way that we used to have them.
Okay. Councillor Johansson, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. So several questions. One is similar to Councillor Kewen. I'm concerned about the suggestion of using the committee rooms. They don't work well for technology, like charging your device is quite difficult, especially if there's multiple people that need to do it. You've got cords running all over the place. I'm concerned about things like the impact of not being able to have a little bit of distance between people with COVID or illness going around, and also to the point that we often we've had capacity issues in those committee rooms where we can't fit people in comfortably to be able to do what they need to do. So do we need to make that decision now, or is that something that could just, like the chair or the mayor or the chief executive, the secretariat could just determine from time to time based on what the nature of the thing is?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And do we also need to make the decision today about limiting people being able to attend in person?
There are no, if a workshop or an information sharing session was held in this room, there are no limits because we can physically accommodate members of the public in this room.
So we don't need to make that call as part of the recommendations?
No, and there isn't a decision before you. The decision about is agreeing that informal meetings will be held by default in public where it's reasonable to do so.
Cool, thanks.
I think we're getting to the point where we're overthinking it. This is something that's been brought to our attention, and I'd like to thank Councillor Johansson and the project team for doing it. But we're going to try it, as you can see, on there for 6 months. So, last question. You got another one?
Yeah, I've got several. One is, so in the page 8 of the report, it says that there may be occasions where workshop is considered sensitive as its publication would inhibit the future exchange of free and frank opinions. And then it goes on to say the free and frank withholding grant is not applicable to formal Lagoima meetings, but could be considered for some workshops on a case-by-case basis. And I was just trying to get an understanding of, are we going to change how we apply that free and frank? The latest example I've been given for free and frank and things needing to be in public excluded has been a design of a cycleway shed pathway along Marine Parade. And I'm just trying to understand if that...
Councillor Johansson, we're getting into the weeds too much.
I'm trying to understand, like in future, would a workshop on, say, a shared path still be considered free and frank and therefore public excluded? Or would this change the way in which we do those things? where we wouldn't use that as a
But
reason.
you're getting down into the weeds too much. Right, next question. I'll ask Councillor Moore, please.
Sorry, I just had one more.
Ha-
Well, I did submit this one and I haven't had an answer, which was in the report. It says that generally the community boards have their workshops in public, but that's not been my experience. So can we just get some understanding if that is true or not?
Right, we'll do that. Okay, thank you.
He can.
No, you can. John can answer that one quickly and clarify that.
Yes, I can. Where a community board holds a workshop, they invite people. There is 2 or 3 way engagement. They are in public. Look, an example of that would be the Waihoro Library Options workshop on Thursday. The briefings, was information transferred, yet they have been in PX. So I think there's some word interplay between workshop and briefing. 6% of community board briefings over the past year have been open. The rest have been PX.
Right, and that's changing with this.
Yep, thank you. I've heard enough. Councillor Moore's the last one, and then we'll put it to.
Thank you.
Right.
Obviously, it's a very big change. There may be some teething challenges along the way. I'm just wondering the reason for landing on 6 months. It's maybe quite far out, and there may be a lot of challenges between now and, say, 3 months. I'm just... is it too far away to review?
There's no magic in the number 6 months. It was just to make sure that we'd really had an opportunity to get over what maybe some initial changes and to make sure everyone understands the changes that we've recommended. But if there's anything major that we need to look at before 6 months, we will.
Understood. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, very good. Right, we're now into debate. Who would like to start off? Councillor Johansson.
Thank you. Thank you to staff for the work that they've done on this. I'm really pleased to see that today we're going to be voting on an option to be much more transparent with our community. I appreciate that there's probably no such thing as a perfect solution, but I think most of what's being proposed hopefully will lead to greater transparency and greater understanding from the community and the public of how we're doing things. My notice of motion came out of the deep frustration that things like right-hand turning arrows on Ferry Road or safe pedestrian crossings in Phillipstown or shared pathways and cycleway route selections were being done in public excluded briefings, and the community was unable to come along and attend and hear the information that was presented to elected members. As recently as last week, I was being given the advice that that needs to happen because it needs to be free and frank, and I totally reject the notion that the community should not be able to understand the thought process behind us designing cycleways, shared pathways, safe pedestrian crossings, etc., or even getting advice from NZTA on why or why not a right-hand turn arrow cannot be put into Ferry Road. So I think this is a real positive. It's been something that I've been pushing for at least 9 years around this council, and I appreciate the Ombudsman's report. I think there's no valid reason why we should keep our briefings as a default setting to be closed. So I totally endorse trying a new way of doing things. I also think when we look at the resident satisfaction surveys and how people comprehend what we do, there's significant decline in the resident satisfaction and comprehension of that. And I think this hopefully can help contribute to trying to reverse that trend. I also think the other important thing is to recognise that we don't have committees as a council by and large now. And under the old system many years ago, we would have a committee that would make recommendations to the full council, which would enable a lot of that work and that consideration and those questions to be answered and dealt with and give the public much more than just a few days' notice of something going direct to council as we currently do now. I think the other trade-off, or not trade-off, the other benefit I think to this approach is hoping, from what I've read in the report, that draft consultation documents will actually come to the elected members into an open meeting for sign-off rather than go to a public excluded briefing for feedback, then go out for consultation. So hopefully the public and the council as elected body can make a decision around what goes out for consultation to our community. So there's transparency around those plans as well, rather than what happens at the moment, which sometimes it can be quite hard for the community to understand where things have come from. So thank you to the staff. I look forward to trialling this and seeing what we can do to improve transparency.
Thank you, Mr. Beer.
Councillor Henston.
I'm fully supportive of the staff's recommendation, and thank you, Councillor Johansson, for bringing the notice of motion in the first instance. I agree that this is what transparency looks like, and I think that in recent years we have been far from transparent, and I recognise the things that you've said. So this is the right thing to do, and I applaud the Mayor for supporting this as well. For me, it's not just the transparency that sways me, it's also the efficiency for our staff. So I'm hoping that this is going to remove some of the unnecessary duplication, and sincerely hope that this then transpires into staff having more time to actually do the mahi and spending less time on some of their PowerPoint presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Scandrett.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to, first of all, say lack of transparency in the past. We are the governors. We have the choice of that. We have the decision. So just want to clarify with the public that there is no conspiracies here. It is our decisions at any time to open or close things. So just wanted to clarify that. So just from now, I really like this. I think this is going to be a real change to our process. I think one of the key things will be freeing up staff time to do other things to be more efficient for the ratepayers of Christchurch. I do think that it's going to be very interesting who turns up on time, because let's be honest, at many of our briefings, it seems that a lot of us don't really know what 9 o'clock and 9:30 means. So it's going to be very interesting, and I look forward to it. I also look forward to people being able to look at the recordings and taking their time to look over what's being discussed and really understand it, and then hopefully contact their local councillors to raise their concerns with us with meetings coming forward with decisions. So I'm really looking forward to this. It's going to be good to get in line with the rest of the country and see how we get with feedback from the Ombudsman's office as well. Cheers.
Okay, Councillor Cotter.
Just quickly, I think this will be a good process. Actually, our meetings may be a little bit longer, but that's up to us, and that's okay. That's fine. The only thing I'm a wee bit worried about is the shorter time that the public may be aware of what's coming on the agenda. And I'm thinking that if we could maybe look at perhaps putting out a forward work program or likelihood of what's coming up in the agendas in the next, say, 2 or 3 months, it might be a feasible thing to do so that people are alert to that. But that could be a work in progress. But I will support this today. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've had Councillor Templeton.
Thanks so much. I wholeheartedly support the move to having open information sharing sessions / briefings and workshops, and I'm really glad that we're getting to that point now. One of the things I am concerned about, though, was the discussion we had yesterday around the cost of maintaining our current structure, where we have briefings on a Tuesday and then formal meeting, with papers, a week or so ahead, so people can be clarifying information, making sure we've got the right stuff in place. And the discussion centred around the fact that while we would need to open those up to the public, it would be cheaper not to. And so briefings are being cut because they are costly, and that means that we will have longer council meetings. I'm fine with that. I'm happy with reading lots of material. But many people aren't. And many people struggle to read the many hundreds of pages that are on our agendas. And I'm concerned that only limiting the way that people access council information is to those who are happy reading long bits of paper. That's for elected members as well as members of the public. We know that many people who get elected are neurodiverse, they have different reading abilities, disabilities, all of those kind of things. And the briefings give people an opportunity and would have, if they were made public, for people to access that information in a different, more accessible format than reading hundreds of pages of agenda. Having said that, we will see how this goes. People will have to be tolerant of a large number of questions during council meetings, and not have exclamations and things of frustration when there are additional questions. That's just the way that goes. Those kind of comments will just have to stop, because that's the acknowledgement that you get a day off on Tuesday now.
Day off. Talk about day off.
I think that was going so well. I think that look,
It wasn't my comment; it was someone else's comment yesterday.
I heard it from you, so I'm not sure who else would have said it. And if actually the irony is, if we'd had yesterday's discussion in public, they would have heard it then too. So look, I think this is. I just want to acknowledge Yanni, Phil, and Pauline for leading this piece of work along with the team who have pulled it together. I think it's actually fantastic that we can be a lot more open, and actually we can work in a way where everyone can see what we're doing. I think the biggest challenge for this will be the quality, and I mean this in the nicest possible way to the organisation, the quality of the reports that come to us. And so there needs to be, the quid pro quo is that actually if the time that was going to be having the briefings, which the Ombudsman has said are not appropriate to do, let's be very clear about that, the Ombudsman has said we should be not having private briefings. The reality is that the time that would have been spent in those needs to be spent on making sure the reports are easy for councillors to understand, but also for the public to understand. I take Sarah's point that not everyone has, everyone has a different ability in terms of how they interpret information, but actually the underlying principle should be that any report we receive that is public should be easily digestible to every person on the street. And so actually if we take that principle to it, there should be no issue, there should be no duplication. And so I guess that really is the challenge to the council staff, is that we're giving you the rope to go away and do it, but if we can improve that quality so that everyone can understand them, then actually we won't need, those briefings will become redundant and in fact be inefficient and duplication. The only other point I'd make, I think it was Helen that said the Ombudsman said there's no such thing as a silly question, but I think he also said we shouldn't encourage silly questions. So let's see how that goes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Peters, please.
Thank you. Certainly supportive of this move, and thank you to Yanni and Pauline for pushing this forward. The notion that we're looking at perhaps having less briefings concerns me a wee bit, because as a new councillor, I've actually found briefings to be incredibly beneficial, a great way to get a lot of information to us as new members efficiently and quickly. So I'm a little surprised that the notion that we're looking at having less briefings because of it. I would have thought just a case of turning the camera on and there we are, we're now transparent. But hey, we'll just see how this goes, and hopefully those of us who are less of the reading kind will not be too disadvantaged and can still keep up and keep ahead of what needs to be happening. So it's certainly supportive.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan.
Thank you. I think this is a great day for local democracy and a watershed moment for CCC. We can hand on heart truly say that everything we do now is open and transparent and in public. Really, this is about making sure that when a briefing is needed, it's in public, and when we don't need a briefing, we simply discuss the matter in a meeting. Because actually, to even have briefings does give rise to a bad public perception. And some will say, look, briefings are just an opportunity to understand matters. But of course, you are welcome to read your papers, you are welcome to ask questions, and you are welcome to ask those questions both beforehand and during a meeting. And who can hand on heart honestly say that during a briefing they've never been asked for a stare they weren't comfortable with? We do cross that line sometimes between decision making and information exchange in a briefing, and I think that's natural, and that's what happens when you allow a forum like that. So I think this is great. This is a change for the better, and I look forward to seeing how it goes.
Councillor Fields.
I agree with everything that's been said. I just want to say I, for one, will not lament the loss of the death by PowerPoint method of information exchange. And for all the budding PowerPoint presenters out there, I think if you're going to put a PowerPoint up and then just read off it. Just send us the PowerPoint because we don't need to hear it. So yeah, but consistency of information, I think we're going to get out of this, which I think is a real win. I mean, jokes aside, I think it's really good to have a level of consistency, and I think that to Sarah's point, like lots of people have different ways of absorbing information, and I think that this will just enhance that really. Yep.
Okay, no more debate. So I will go ahead. We've got a mover and seconder. Yep. So I will go ahead and put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you. That's carried. Now, before I move